For more insight on the latest revelations by Mr. Trump, let's speak now with Klaus Larres. He's a distinguished professor of history and international affairs at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
He's also a global fellow at the WABA Initiative for Strategic Competition in Washington, D.C. Professor, good to have you on the show. We've heard comments from our correspondent. I wonder if you agree as well. Did President Trump say anything new, or at least provide some clarity on what the mission is now?
Well, it was an interesting speech. It was relatively short. I'd expected a somewhat longer speech because normally Trump talks a lot longer than he did tonight. He was pretty concise, pretty much to the point, also quite unusual for Trump. And I think the main objective of this speech was to reassure the public that the rising gas prices, the falling stock market, that is just temporary, that it will be overcome very quickly. He mentioned 2 to 3 weeks again, and he tried to express confidence that the mission is almost completed and that it will soon be finished and that it will be a huge victory for the United States. It will make the United States safer and stronger and more prosperous. He didn't quite explain in what precise way, but he claimed that. And what I also noticed, and much to my surprise, I have to say, was that he was not too negative on the European NATO allies. Because before the speech and also in the last few days, Trump has said an awful lot of negative things about the Europeans, that they were not on board, that they didn't have courage to join the United States and things like that. And he made a few snide remarks about the Europeans, that they should buy oil in the United States or go to the Strait of Hormuz and open it themselves and get the oil themselves. But apart from that, he really was fairly quiet about that. And there was general fear among the NATO allies that he would actually announce a withdrawal from NATO or scaling down of American commitment to NATO. And all that hasn't happened. So I would say that most European NATO allies are quite relieved after that speech.
Understood. I wonder, though, did he make a convincing case to the Americans? I mean, talking about Iran's nuclear program and talking about how this is going to be short-term and good for the longer term for the country?
I would say if you are a Democrat and were strongly opposed to the war, he probably didn't convince anyone. His supporters will be convinced by that, and perhaps people who were quite unsure but have a tendency to side with Trump, he may have been able to reassure them that it is not longer lasting and that it was utterly necessary to do so. He played up the nuclear danger from Iran and said how close Iran was to building a nuclear weapons. He brought in the ballistic missiles they were building, and he also mentioned that Iran was supporting terrorist proxy forces in the Middle East, and that his action and the brilliant action by the American military has really prevented that Iran can continue on that course, and therefore the world has been made safer and stronger, according to him. And a lot of people who are favoring his position will have been somewhat reassured by that. Yes.
Okay, Professor, one of the cases that Mr. Trump made for why the war in Iran is necessary is that Iran was right at the doorstep of gaining a nuclear weapon. But we've heard conflicting signals. At times, the administration would say that the nuclear threat is neutralized. Now it's being emphasized again. What do you make of that? What's changed? Is this intelligence or messaging?
Nothing has changed. That is just the assumption and the claims Trump and his administration has been making for many weeks now. But all the experts say that is simply not correct. And we had the 2015 agreement, the nuclear agreement signed between the United States, Iran, and a number of European countries, and also Russia and China, which actually prevented Iran from building a nuclear weapon. That agreement neglected the ballistic missiles in Iran. It also neglected the support Iran gives for people like Hezbollah and Hamas. But regarding nuclear weapons, the 2015 agreement was actually quite good and contained Iran's ambitions. And Trump didn't like that, so he withdrew from it in 2018. And ever since, he has basically been trying to go back to the nuclear achievement of the 2015 agreement. Of course, he didn't mention any of that. He actually said the 2015 agreement was a really bad agreement, and no real expert agrees with that. And all the experts also say Iran was nowhere close to building a nuclear weapon. And that would have perhaps been possible in the future, but many years down the future. So the Trump administration has clearly exaggerated the case for having to attack Iran and to bombard Iran in order to take out Iran's nuclear ability. This was not an imminent threat. And that, of course, raises the question whether it was against international law to attack a sovereign country such as Iran, because there was no imminent threat.
Interesting that you should mention that, Professor, because President Trump also talked about infrastructure in his speech. I just want to ask for that to be played back so we get an idea of what he said.
We are going to hit each and every one of their electric generating plants very hard and probably simultaneously. We have not hit their oil, even though that's the easiest target of all, because it would not give them even a small chance of survival or rebuilding. But we could hit it, and it would be gone, and there's not a thing they could do about it.
So I'm wondering, apart from the question about whether it's a war crime, Professor, I'm wondering what would be the impact, what would be the implications of President Trump doing something like that, going after power or water supplies in Iran?
I'm not sure that he really means it. He is clearly threatening it, and he wants to come to an agreement, to an understanding with Iran. He also said in his speech that regime change was apparently never what he intended. So, of course, a few times in the past, he has said that regime change was his objective. But now he said that regime change never really was what he really wanted to go for. And he wants to have an understanding, and he has claimed for many weeks that, or for many days now, that there have been talks between the United States and Iran. The Iranians have rejected that claim, and we understand that there are only indirect talks taking place with Pakistan as a mediator. So direct talks between Iran and the United States seem not to have been taken place. But Trump would like to get there, to really have a treaty with Iran, a peace treaty with Iran. And in order to get there, to make the Iranian regime move towards that goal, he threatens all sorts of things. And in theory, he could indeed do what he just threatened, because the American military, from a military point of view, has been very successful. The Navy has been taken out. Any air defense systems have been taken out. The Iranians have. Much of the Air Force has been taken out, and radar and satellite installations. So the American Air Force could bombard watering plants and electric plants, but I wonder whether Trump really wants to do that, because that would, of course, be pretty terrible for the entire region. And there would be also an awful lot of pressure by the Gulf states on Trump not to go that far. It is really a threat in order to get the Iranian regime, or what is left of the regime, to the negotiating table to come to some sort of deal with Donald Trump. And of course, that deal has to include an opening of the Hormuz Straits. That is clear. So Trump also said that he doesn't really need oil and gas which goes through the Straits of Hormuz. But it would look bad for him if he withdraws from the war after 2 or 3 weeks, declares victory, but the Straits of Hormuz are still closed, and international shipping trade can still not function properly regarding the Straits of Hormuz. That would only be a very, very tarnished victory. And of course, that is not in Trump's interest.
All right. Mr. Trump also claims that the U.S. doesn't import any oil from Strait of Hormuz, and that the countries that do depend on it should step up and take it and buy U.S. oil instead. I think we do have a soundbite from that. Let's play it and then continue the conversation.
the countries of the world that do receive oil through the Hormuz Strait must take care of that passage. They must cherish it. They must grab it and cherish it. They can do it easily. We will be helpful, but they should take the lead in protecting the oil that they so desperately depend on.
So just how realistic is it for other countries to bypass Hormuz and rely on U.S. supply instead, Professor?
Very unrealistic, I would say, because Iran doesn't need to keep bombing the Strait of Hormuz. The threat of being able to do so, even hitting one tanker out of 100, will scare all the tankers in the world, will scare all the insurance companies in the world, and of course also the states like the Gulf states, and they will then not dare to drive tankers through the Straits of Hormuz. And as long as Iran has that capability, only with a few ballistic missiles left, then the Straits of Hormuz will essentially continue to be blocked. So it is highly unrealistic that you can just drive your national navies to the Straits of Hormuz and defeat Iran, because Iran has a chokehold on the Straits of Hormuz. And of course, before the war, the American military knew that very well. They informed and advised Trump that that would be the chokehold, that would be the leverage which Iran has and will probably use. But apparently the administration did not listen properly or did not want to believe it and went ahead with the bombardment of Iran anyway. And soon afterwards, Iran, of course, effectively closed the Straits of Hormuz. Since then, we have an economic crisis, a global energy crisis, and many countries in the world, particularly countries in the global south, many developing countries such as the Philippines, Thailand, and many other countries have had severe problems obtaining gas and oil. And the more developed countries, such as the European ones, they are still able to get a lot of oil and gas, but prices have rocketed. So the entire world has been affected by the Iran war. And now Trump is really trying to push the responsibility for opening the Straits of Hormuz to other countries, particularly, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, to the European allies. And that is, of course, highly unfair. You know, Trump is really responsible for bringing about the closure of the Straits of Hormuz, and now he gives the responsibility for opening the straits to other countries. This is quite convenient and will not be very popular. That will lead to a lot of resentment among other states.
Okay, Professor, we'll have to leave it there for now, but thank you very much for your insight and your analysis today. Klaus Larres, a distinguished professor of history and international affairs at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.